So, well, we are in this uh, last question of the passage, question number 12. So, let's look into the question. What does it say? It asks us the question that called as what is a critical assumption underlying the idea? What is a critical assumption that underlying the idea or weakening the idea of moral witness discussed in the passage? So, it's a critical assumption based question. So look at the moral witness, which is given in the um, fourth paragraph, last line or penultimate line of the fourth paragraph, where it is stated about moral witness. So it begins with the idea called as this new way of writing. Recent history emphasized what Caroline Jean called the moral witness voices of survivors who could speak on behalf of the dead. So, because the dead had a lesson to impart to humanity, that is what it is pointed. Now, what is a critical assumption underlying the idea of moral witness discussed in the passage? Let's see that it's an assumption based question. It means we need to assume, right, that point to the moral witness discussed in the passage. Let's analyze the each of the question. Um, so if we look into each of the options, the first option, which is pointed, the dead have a moral lesson to impart to humanity. So option one suggests that the critical assumption is that the dead have a moral lesson to impart to humanity. However, this is explicitly mentioned in the passage. Now, if you observe that it is present in the passage, so therefore it can be called as a premises, or it is one of the premise in the text. So, like I pointed, this new way of writing recent history emphasizes what Caroline Jean called the moral witness voices of survivor who could speak on behalf of the dead, because the dead has a lesson, right? So in that case, the dead have a moral lesson to impart to humanity, which is given here in this. So therefore, this could not be considered as the answer to or critical assumption to the idea of moral witness. So we'll consider incorrect. So because of considering it is the premise to the paragraph or premise to the passage. So premise means that called as a stated region. The meaning of premise is known as a stated region. So hence option 1 is eliminated. Look at the option 2. What does it say? Option 2 stated moral witness have a direct and emotional connections to the historical events they describe. Option 2, which would be called as means, the most appropriate assumption. Why? Now, because option 2 claims that the critical assumption is the moral witness have a direct and emotional connection to the historical event they describe, because they are the witness. This is a valid assumption actually. Why this is a valid assumption? Because of the idea pointed that uh, when anything occurred or during then, so they are the witness and they have seen it. And those people who have been murdered or killed, so with them they have the emotional connection, right? So not only to the dead but also to the historical event. So this is a valid assumption, right, on the passage, as the concept of moral witness involves survivors who can speak on behalf of the dead because they have a strong emotional connection to the event. So therefore, option 2 would be called as an appropriate assumption to the man's idea called moral witness, right? Look at the option 3. What does option 3 point out? Option 3 stated the primary purpose of moral witness is to apportion blame. Now, obviously, option 3 states the idea, right, which is not an assumption discussed in the passage, as the passage emphasizes what? Now, conveying, it conveys, um, or you can say that the experiences, conveys the experiences and lessons and lessons experiences and lessons of survivors, rather than assigning plan, rather than assign assigning blames, rather than assigning blames, right? So on the basis of that, we could consider option three would be also not the means correct idea, because or it is not called as a critical assumption. It is something called as a distorting the idea of the critical assumption, or to the moral witness. Look at the option 4. What does option 4 stated? Historians have the primary responsibility to record events impartially. Option 4, uh, which is pointed about that the primary responsibility to record events impartially. So while historians are mentioned in the passage, this is not the central assumption, you can say, right? It may be called as one of the assumption, but not called as a central central assumption. Central assumption, um, that is indicating the concept of moral witness. So in that case, option 4 also distorting the idea. So option 1, 3, 4 are means eliminated because of the regions which I pointed here. Like I pointed here, the passage discusses the concept of moral witness, which involves the survivors speaking on behalf of the dead, because the dead have a lesson to impart the humanity. So, to determine the critical assumption means underlying this concept, we need to identify what is necessary for moral witness to be a valid and meaningful idea in shaping collective memory. So, we find out that option 1, which is not an assumption but rather a stated premise. So, option 2 is the appropriate one, because the concept of moral witness relies on the idea that survivors have a strong emotional connection to the events and their first hand accounts are valuable. Therefore, option 2 is considered as the appropriate assumption to the idea of moral witness. So, whereas option 3 is incorrect, as the concept of moral witness, as described in the passage, is more about, uh, like I pointed, conveying the experience and less of survivor rather than assigning blames. So, um, even if you look into the option 4, which is incorrect, while historians are mentioned in the passage, this is not an assumption underlying the concept of moral witness. Hence, the correct answer is option 2. I hope you understood the means uh, the last question, um, pertain to the answer which is present here.